Hey y'all, it's Heel Heat time.
Hi everybody and welcome to Heel Heat. My name is George Coles and this is an episode of It Came From the Network. On this episode, we're covering All-Star Wrestling from November 22nd, 1977. Yes folks, an event from almost 40 years ago. Now if you're not familiar with It Came From the Network, this is where we review the weird, wacky, campy, and sometimes just outright bad stuff that you could find on the WWE Network. Since All-Star Wrestling was recently uploaded, several episodes, I decided to go back and check one out. I wanted to get one as close to my actual date of birth as I could. I was born in March of 77. Unfortunately, there wasn't one. But I was born March 22nd, so there was a November 22nd. I went with that. With that being said, let's jump right into it. And remind you, I'm going to be a little bit grading on a curve on this. If you haven't seen wrestling of the era or even wrestling of the early 80s, it's almost a totally different sport than it is now. But we'll explain some of this as we go through these matches. The first match of the night, we have Jose Estrada and Johnny Rodz versus High Chief Peter Maivia and Chief Jay Strongbow. This match, I didn't never know that Maivia and Strongbow teamed. Was news to me, so I was pleasantly surprised. Estrada and Johnny Rodz I had seen early on when I was a wrestling fan. I started really watching wrestling when I was about 6 years old. My mom used to tell me I always watched it from the time I was a baby, that I would emulate Jimmy Superfly Snuka. But my earliest memories, and I trace this by the network, was 83-ish when Piper came into WWE. And it was before Hogan was there, because I remember Piper being there without Hogan. And I remember some of the stuff that happened pre-Hogan. So it was at the end of 83 is when I really start my earliest memories in wrestling. And Rodz and Estrada were still somewhat around at that time, kind of as the jobbers of the WWF at the time. Which is what they were used here in enhancement talent. But they were both very good wrestlers, could handle a match very well. Talk about the differences here. This match was won with a sleeper hold, with Strongbow and Maivia going over. So, there's a big difference. On a scale of 1 to 5, 5 being the best and 1 being the worst, I'd give this match a 3, a decent opener. Like I said, looking at it with the time, it's not the worst matches I've seen of this era. It's not the best. It's right about middle of the road. Now going from that, we have Joe Turco versus Ivan Putski. The thing that really grabbed me on this, and I was a fan of Ivan Putski as a little kid. I remember Polish Power. He was great. Joe Turco and just how big and massive he was, and even a lot of these guys were just scary looking. He was a scary looking dude. He was a dude that looked like he could beat you up. This was a decent match. Putski wins with his patented bear hug. Again, as we see, a sleeper hold, a bear hug, kind of basic elementary wrestling moves. I thought it was a fun match. I enjoyed it. It brought me back. Of course, Ivan was a little bit older when I remember him, but I remember cheering for Putski, and I remember Putski being one of the guys that I really wanted to win. I liked it. I liked his strength stuff, when he would bend bars, all the stuff they do with the strongmen usually. But this is a good match. I'd say, if I'm being honest, I give it a 2 out of 5. Not as good as the first match, but not bad. I wouldn't it didn't lose my interest. It wasn't the greatest match of all time. It's hard to give it much more than a 2, though. Next up, we have an interview segment with Peter Maivia and Chief Jay Strongbow talking about wanting to fight the tag team champions, which is Mr. Fuji and Professor Toru Tanaka, at some point. The best part of this is we get 70s interviewer slash commentator Vince McMahon, who's a commentator throughout the show. If you haven't seen 70s Vince, it is fantastic. He's basically doing his best Gordon Soley impression, and it's great. I love it. I thought this was awesome. I thought this was a great little thing. I love seeing Vince in this era, and even into the 80s and some into the 90s as the announcer. He's not the best announcer in the world. He's better than a lot of the people we have today. But to me, this was really fun to peek back at seeing Vince when he didn't own the company. He was working for his father's company as just a talent, not even a partial owner. So there may have been the thought in his mind of buying it at some point here, but that was a few years into the future at this point still. Now, coming off of that, we have Steve King versus Butcher Paul Vachon with Lou Albano. This was probably my favorite match of the night. I'm going to give it a 4 out of 5. I really enjoyed this match. I like Butcher Paul Vachon. I like him both and his brother Mad Dog Vachon. Butcher wins with the splash. Again, another very elementary move, a basic move, but with the times. This was fun. The Butcher character, he's a great character wrestler, which a lot of this harkens back, and I'm going to talk about more of this at the end. I want to tie a lot of this together, but it was just great watching him and seeing him, and again, much like I said with Turco and some of these other guys, just a big, menacing, scary-looking dude, to be honest with you. Next up, we had what I thought going into it was going to be the best match of the card. Larry Zbyszko versus Stan Stasiak. Stan Stasiak came out with his manager, the Grand Wizard. The match ends in a double countout, which I kind of understand. You got to take yourself back to this time again, and remember that they didn't have named guys versus each other. Zbyszko this is when he was still Bruno's understudy, but he was still very much a guy that they were banking to build the future on. And Stan Stasiak is a former world champion at this point. So they're both mid to top card guys. You wouldn't see this match on normal TV, and if you did, it would end in a double countout, or it would end in a double disqualification. So you'd buy a ticket to go see the same match at your local arena, whether it be the Philadelphia Spectrum, the Boston Garden, Madison Square Gardens, Washington, D.C., Allentown, Pennsylvania, anywhere in the WWE's, or actually it was WWF at this time, at the WWF's territory, you would have paid to see these guys go at it, because you would want to see, they'd put them in a lumberjack match, or a cage match, or a strap match, something to keep them from running away from each other, which is what happened here. So you would pay to see this feud resolve at a house show, basically. Which is back to what it was always. Back in this time, the show was a commercial, an hour-long commercial, basically, for your local house shows. This is what they would use to get you to buy tickets. They didn't make money off the TV show like they do now. They made money off of the house show tickets. So that's why we see jobber matches. That's why we see no contests. That's why you have to go to the house show to see who's going to win. Next up, we have our main event of the night, Johnny Rivera and Dewey Robinson, which, fun fact, a little bit later on in his career, Dewey, who had been a star, changed his persona, changed his gimmick up, and became the Missing Link. really cool to see Dewey. I hadn't really seen much of Dewey Robinson, I'm sorry, before he was a Missing Link character. I obviously remember the Missing Link. He was great. So it was cool to see him in this role. And they went up against the tag team champions of the world, the aforementioned Mr. Fuji and Professor Toru Tanaka, managed by Freddie Blassie. This match, much like every other match, won with a basic move. Mr. Fuji hits a flying clothesline. I want to say I'd give this match a 3 out of 5. And I'm sorry, I forgot to mention on the Stasiak and Zbyszko, that match was a 2 out of 5. Sorry about that. But I digress. I give this match a 3 out of 5. It was very solid. I enjoyed, like I said, I enjoyed the factor of seeing Dewey before the Missing Link. I liked watching Tanaka and Fuji wrestle together. I thought that was great to see one of the great tag teams. I like seeing Freddie Blassie, who, along with the other two guys, and I thought it was really cool that we got Lou Albano, the Grand Wizard, and Freddie Blassie all on the same show, which, if you know anything, in the 70s, they were kind of the trifecta of managers in the WWF. They were the guys that basically had full control over the heel side of the fence. And it was really cool to see them, all three of them represented on the show. Albano with Butcher Vachon, Grand Wizard with Stan Stasiak, a longtime member of his stable, and Fuji and Tanaka with Blassie, who was a longtime manager for them as well. So it was really, really fun to see the managers on here, something that wrestling's missing now. 3 really great, legendary talents, all 3 of them in the Hall of Fame. I mean, if you go up and down this card, we got Johnny Rodz is in the Hall of Fame, Peter Maivia is in the Hall of Fame, Jay Strongbow is not, but he should be. Ivan Putski, I'm not 100% sure, but I'm pretty sure he is. Butcher Vachon, who's in the Hall of Fame. Lou Albano in the Hall of Fame. Larry Zbyszko in the Hall of Fame. Stan Stasiak, probably. I know he wasn't the greatest world champion, but just for the fact of the era that he was a champion, he probably should be in there. Just my opinion. Grand Wizard in the Hall of Fame. Mr. Fuji's in the Hall of Fame. Freddie Blassie's in the Hall of Fame. So we got a ton of Hall of Fame wrestlers packed into this one show. And I really enjoyed it. I had a lot more fun watching this than I thought I was going to. The simplicity and the believability of these matches, even now, even in 2018, while I'm reviewing this, 41 years later almost, you could believe what they were doing, even if it ended in a sleeper or a bear hug or a splash or a clothesline. They made that believable. They made that move believable. And the funny thing, like I said, I was going to tie everything together at the end. There wasn't one time that anybody came off the top rope. There wasn't any crazy dive to the outside. Nothing extravagant. Basic moves, and these guys were getting over on with this. Even with me watching it now, I thoroughly enjoyed this a lot more than I thought I was. I thought I was going to give all these matches 1s. But as you can see, had a couple 3s and a 4 in there. So, I mean, altogether it was very interesting. A lot of things I want to point out. The diversity of the card. People talk about how wrestling kind of follows with the world, and I know there's some issues here with stereotypes, but we had on the card we had several Puerto Rican wrestlers, a Samoan wrestler, a Polish wrestler, a couple Canadian wrestlers, and Turco and Dewey Robinson. I mean, you kind of had and Paul Vachon, of course, some Japanese wrestlers and Fuji and Tanaka, so we kind of had a very diverse cast of wrestlers, even though some of it was a little bit on the nose. Jay Strongbow, who famously is not really an Indian, portraying a stereotypical Indian character, maybe a little too much. I don't know. I don't think he did it offensively, and I think for the time, adjusted for the time, I really don't think it was meant to offend anybody. Ivan Putski being put over as the Polish Power, without it being something negative, I really enjoyed. Like I said, all the guys on here, it was cool to see how people got over and how different the physiques are. You didn't get, other than Putski and maybe Peter Maivia, and Dewey Robinson, of course. You didn't have the bodybuilder build. These were more just big, rough, tumbling guys you would see in a bar fight. And that's what it looked like. You had a bunch of brawlers. To me, this looked like if you went to a bar on a Friday night and a fight just broke out. That's what the whole show looked like. But overall, I was thoroughly impressed. I enjoyed it. I had a lot more fun than I thought I was going to. I'll probably review a couple more of these just because of how much I enjoyed it. But with that being said, let's jump right into our ratings for it. Now, as we did with the matches, the overall show, we have a 1 to 5 scale, 1 being the worst, 5 being the best. 5 is a Kane, a 4 is a Gold Dust, 3 is a Hurricane Helms, 2 is a Dungeon of Doom, and 1 is a Gobbledygooker. Honestly, I'm going to give this one a Hurricane Helms, a 3. I know I keep saying how fun it is, how much I enjoyed it more than I thought I was. My expectations going into this were very low. The fact that it ended up being a middle-of-the-road show blew my mind. I thought I was going to watch absolute boring wrestling, that I was going to have trouble staying awake watching it. But I was enthralled. Every match kept me interested. Every match kept me glued to what was happening. Was some of it not as good as the rest? Yeah. Turco and Putski was a little bit slow and plodding. I wish I would have seen more of Zbyszko and Stasiak. Wish I would have seen more of Vachon and King. But the tag match main event was good. The tag match at the beginning was really good. The interview was awesome. So, to me, that balances out. Like I said, I give it a 3, a Hurricane Helms, right at the middle of the road. But basically, that's all I have to say on this. My name is George Coles, and this has been another episode of It Came From the Network.